This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our bi-weekly board chair check-in and update meeting. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I will be moderating this call. In order to avoid background noise, I ask that you please mute yourself if you're not speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. If you're calling in from your cell phone, please take a moment to physically mute your cell phone, as I'm unable to mute you from my computer unless I mute all participants. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under services. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. I see we don't have the crowds we were getting in the midst of the reopening discussion, but that's fine. We have a lot to talk about today, and we have a lot of things we can get to. Want you to know that at 11:45, we are going to have a couple of guest speakers. Marc Brackett from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Most of you know Marc. And Scott Levy, also from there, is going to tell you a little about the free course that is being offered. To everybody. I hear somebody. What are you, please? Thank you. So I wanted to start with Patrice because I know she has a few updates from yesterday's state board meeting, maybe something from today's education committee meeting that is still going on. So Patrice, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Bob, and good morning, everyone. Yes, it's been a busy week in the meeting context. And as I participate in these various meetings, whether they be organized by state agencies or various commissions, it's very clear to me that the role of the meeting producer is critical to the successful experience. And so I really want to acknowledge all that Wilmarie has done and continues to do to make sure that our meetings proceed as smoothly as possible, that they begin when they're scheduled to begin, because there's really nothing more frustrating than sitting for 20 minutes listening to a recording of, please stay on the line, your webinar will begin shortly. So I just want to acknowledge that when you look around and participate in other meetings, it's clear that we've got an amazing producer, and we're all very grateful for that.
Absolutely.
So the one scheduling note is to remind all of you that CABE's virtual delegate assembly will be held on November 19th. That's the date it was originally scheduled to be held as an in-person event. The materials, the resolutions, and the process to register for the virtual delegate assembly will be going out early next week. We anticipate at this time that the delegate assembly will begin at 2 p.m. and will not last more than 2 hours. We will be able to do it so that delegates will be able to speak to the issues, and we will not need to buy the $30,000 to $60,000 platform that some associations are using. So yesterday, the State Board of Education met. President Don Harris was there as a board member. So Don, please feel free to chime in. A couple of things that I think it's important to bring to your attention. One is that every state agency was required to adopt budget reductions for the upcoming 2 fiscal years. And so the agencies are required to comply. This is a fairly standard practice in Connecticut at least. And 2 areas where there are reductions are in the VO-AG programs and the technical high schools. And of note is that the ECS grant is maintained at its level of funding. The special education excess cost grant is also flat funded, and that creates a $66 million gap between what would be needed to meet the statutory provisions for reimbursement under the grant if it were not capped. So that continues to be an issue of concern. That gap continues to grow between what the legislature originally intended to provide for excess cost and what they're actually delivering. The other issue concerns snow days, and the State Board of Education voted to have staff develop guidelines around providing for virtual learning on what would otherwise be snow days. There are obviously a number of issues connected with that, in that sometimes there are snow days that also create a circumstance where there isn't power in some homes, where there isn't internet connectivity until those things are repaired. I also would like to pose a question to those of you participating this morning. I know that some teachers are in the hybrid or fully remote learning model, are actually going to their classrooms and doing live instruction that's transmitted from their classroom. Obviously, that would be a complicating factor if we were trying to count that as a school day and it was actually a day of hazardous driving. Can any of you tell me, either send me an email or if you want to comment now, if your district uses that model for any of your staff, where they're actually coming into the building but the students are not? So I'll leave that question out there. On the weekly call with the Department of Public Health and the State Department of Education, one of the questions that we raised this week was around the announcement that Connecticut and many other states would be receiving a large number of the rapid COVID tests. And there was some indication from the governor that those would be great to be used in schools. The Department of Public Health made it clear that they are looking at this issue. They currently do not have a plan to be using these on a wide scale basis in schools, and in fact pointed out that they are most accurate for individuals that are displaying symptoms, and that we don't want students or staff who are displaying symptoms coming to school and being tested there. So more to come on that, but know that there is not a rollout plan for daily administration in all schools to all individuals. The education committee
are open to everybody.
Say that again, Sheila.
The public health phone calls that happen on Tuesday morning are open to everybody to be able to listen in on. So yeah. If you are wanting to do it, I suppose at this point, just contact Charlene Russell Tucker at the department.
You don't even have to do that. We send out in our Wednesday emails the updates.
Thank you.
In our update Wednesday emails, we have a link to those. You can get registered, and they expect that to go on for quite a while. So we can certainly make sure. Certainly, I would suggest you make sure you're on those. They're very good calls.
It's great to hear directly from the experts, and they are very transparent and very honest. When Dr. Carter began the response to our question about, yes, that those rapid tests were news to them when the announcement was made that they were coming to Connecticut in large quantities, but they are also really instill a feeling of confidence and raise the trust level in terms of how we are proceeding in our schools in Connecticut. The education committee meeting this morning, there was a presentation by the department that really covered issues that you have been briefed on in the past. The questions from legislators dealt with the need for additional resources for counselors, for social workers, for SEL programs, issues of concern around attendance, particularly in our larger districts, and what attendance really looks like if a student is learning remotely and only logs in once a week what does that say about their actual engagement in school? A desire to focus on accelerating learning, and some interest among some members of the committee about suspending some of the existing mandates for a year so that there can be a more strategic focus on areas where students have had learning gaps and learning loss. We had actually suggested last June that they suspend the professional development mandates so that there could be a real focus on both SEL and strategies to engage students in distance learning. There was interest among legislators in looking at raising the limit of the salary for retired educators to help address some of the shortage issues that are being experienced now and will likely continue to be experienced. Right now, retired educators can be reemployed, but they can only receive 45% of their previous salary. That limits, obviously, the number of days that they're available to work. And there was also interest around looking at ways the state can facilitate bulk or group arrangements for a number of the learning platforms, for Zoom and things like that. And maybe that's something that the Connecticut Technology Group that Nick represents us on will be pursuing with Doug Casey. I think that's it for an overview of meetings in the last 24 hours.
Wow. Thanks, Patrice. I now wanted to call on Nick to talk about the field services, make sure everybody knows what we have available. Nick?
Good morning. Yeah, and it's timely because things are starting to pick up. As many of you know, because I've worked in many of your districts, we provide field service for our members where we go out and work with your boards directly. The agendas can be pretty much anything you need them to be, from basic roles and responsibilities, goal setting, self-evaluation is very popular right now. Working with a few boards where part of the dilemma was that people were elected last November, and a lot of boards had scheduled training. Some of it started to happen after budget. You either sneak it in December or you start thinking about professional development after budget season. And because of COVID, a lot of those meetings got canceled. And so it created two things. One, a backlog. And now people are starting to say, well, we really kind of need this work. So I'm starting to schedule a lot of meetings. But the other thing is, a lot of those new board members who never got training in how to be a board member in normal times are now a board member in very abnormal times. And so it's complicating some of the behaviors and some of the issues that are happening with boards. And so I've been doing some, I guess, more intense work than typical for this time of year. Some issues that are, and especially when the meetings are public and more people are watching because they're being Zoomed, some of the repercussions are more serious. So I did want people to know that we are doing work with boards. I've been trying very hard to keep them electronic where possible. And most people are still more comfortable doing Zoom. I have done some in-person meetings, which presents its own sets of problems because in one meeting, masks were a little hard to get people to keep on. In fact, I went for a COVID test last week because I had a cold, and it was only a cold, and I knew it was probably only a cold, but I couldn't take a chance after being out with 4 boards within that 2-week period. So we are more than happy to work with your board in person if that's how you want to do it. But we're going to ask that you wear masks, that there's social distancing, all the things that one would expect. Because I realize many of you are trying to talk about the example of not being afraid to meet together if we're going to ask kids to be in school, and we all understand that. But again, board members often are, and I can speak because I'm in that same category, at a more advanced stage and have more medical risks. And so it's not fair to ask them to be in person if they're not, they're concerned about health. So we'll gladly work with you however that is. And again, it's for any of the types of work that we've always done for you, whether it's, and as I say, board evaluation seems to be a very popular topic right now. Doing one tonight, in fact. So I leave it at that. If anybody's got any questions, please, feel free to ask, email me. We can start talking calendar dates or whatever.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. I'm
You're
glad
welcome.
you're back to working with districts. I know that's
Me
something
too.
you love
It's
to do.
part of I love it. I really enjoy it. I know when a meeting goes well and I've made a difference, that I feel really good about it. So I just want to remind people we're here.
Great. Thank you. So now for the next, 20 minutes or so, Patrice and I wanted to ask a few questions to stir some interest and things to talk about that we were interested, but I think you'd like to hear from other members too, or other chairs too. And my first one has to do with something we've heard from the unions, that there are insufficient supplies of PPE and other materials in the classrooms and in the districts. Can I ask the chairs, are you hearing the same thing? Please either speak up or write a message.
I don't have that particular problem in Bloomfield. So
Okay.
and that's even with a stingy council. Although things are going well in Bloomfield, and now they're trying to be our friends again. So it's a vicious merry-go-round.
That came from Windsor Locks. We're going to arbitration over it. We've tried an MOU and it just didn't work.
Pat, are there specific issues? Is it limited to PPE, or are there other issues that
We're
you can
41
share?
issues, but one of the main one was PPE and safety cleaning supplies, which we use everything from the guidelines of the state and from CDC, and they don't like them.
Thanks, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
No issues in Windsor. All collective bargaining units were at the table from day one and understood what we were going to be delivering and what we had, and everything is going well. And when there's issues, they have a pipeline directly to the superintendent to resolve, and anything that's been brought up to him has been resolved rather quickly. So thankfully, we're in a good place.
Great. Others?
No issue in Simsbury. I'm going along what Len was talking about, the same situation. So we've had open communication from the beginning about supplies, PPE products, what have you. So we're basically on the same table, and they know if they have any questions or any requests are asked, that they can freely do so.
And I see in the chat, Region 18 says it's not an issue, and Bob Trefai, on behalf of the technical high schools, they're not having an issue.
And I'll just chime in and say in Newtown, I'm not aware of any issues.
Okay, the survey that the CEA did was aimed at the alliance districts. Anybody from an alliance district want to speak to this? I don't see any of our biggest boards on this call, but you might be calling in on telephone.
We're an alliance district. Windsor Locks is an alliance district.
Right.
Bloomfield's an alliance district.
Right. So it's not
Windsor is an alliance district.
Yeah. So we got a few. Okay.
I see Chris Wilson says it's not an issue in Bristol.
especially with the grant that we received from the state. That really made up a lot of the big difference. We got almost $1.2 million in state money of the $130 million that the governor put out. So that really helped us.
What's going on with your unions? We have this once a week discussion, partners meetings.
For those of you on the phone, Bob just made air quotes around partners.
We do consider ourselves partners, but when we get on these meetings, we hear a lot from CEA and AFT in particular about all the problems being faced by the teachers. And yet when I talk to board members, I hear mostly very good things about how the relationships are with the unions. I don't know if it's a CEA versus AFT type of thing, but I'd love to hear if things are going well or they're not going well.
Bob, this is Megan in Woodstock. I can say that we were supposed to negotiate our next 3-year contract with our teachers here in addition to an MOA. And they be consideration before our board tonight to have a 1-year extension of our current contract. And our teachers have been really wonderful to work with. They have a very good relationship with the superintendent and administrative team. Their union representation has worked really well with our board attorney. And I think I'll find out definitively tonight that the union has approved this 1-year extension. We also have got midway through negotiations with the MOA, and it seems to have stalled, but not necessarily for a bad reason. That there's a possibility because the communication and the trust is there. So we've been fortunate. We also have kind of braced ourselves to see what would happen, or as far as the influence of the CEA and the AFT. And while they've certainly expressed some of those concerns, it hasn't stopped us in any way, and it hasn't made the discussions negative.
Great. Leonard, you were about to say something, I think. Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, the CEA, I think, is promoting a statewide agenda, I believe. I think it depends on relationships at the local level. Again, our co-presidents for the teacher unions have been outstanding, and they understand that they have to toe the line a little bit with CEA and those type of things, but what they don't want to do is mess up what they have at home. And they're very thankful for being, one, at the table, and number two, having a strong voice at the table, which, they feel some of their other counterparts just don't have. So they're understanding of what CA is trying to do for the greater good, but at least in Windsor, they're not trying to disrupt the grass on the other side of the fence.
If I could, just to piggyback on Leonard's comments, I believe, well, as an old member of the CEA and some association with the AFT, I believe it is a statewide agenda. The whole key for Bloomfield, and I'll speak just to Bloomfield, is your relationship with on the local level. Our superintendent has bi-weekly meetings with the union president, and we try to address any needs and concerns that they may have, and we're meeting them. It's not just lip service that's being given to the teachers union, which for us is the under the auspices of CEA. And but for those of you having issues, I'm gonna just throw that one word out there: communication, relationships. It goes a long way. They understand that we are in a pandemic, and they understand that we're trying to do the very best job we can do for them. And knock on wood, we haven't had any issues.
To be very honest with you, we've had excellent relationships for all the years I've been on the Board of Ed with the teachers. This is the first time, and it was CEA. I sat in on the discussions with the MOU, and I couldn't believe the CEA representative.
Thanks, Pat. Others? Hearing none. Patrice, you want to ask another question?
What are we're interested in knowing what are the good strategies that you can share with your colleagues that you're using to reach students, particularly those students that are either fully distance learning, or if you're using the hybrid model, they're distance some days, but particularly those students who are full-time by parental choice in a distance learning mode.
That's a good question, but I'm not sure you're asking the right people.
Yeah.
Because we're not doing the teaching. So
right.
It's a good question to get a superintendent in here for with CAPS's permission. That would can answer those questions a lot better than we can, because we deal with the politics of it all. And I don't. The closest I get to the classroom is my granddaughter doing her pre-calculus assignments. You know, they come off on my printer and I look and I shake my head and I just pass it on to her. So I don't know how the information is getting transcribed, but I know it's being done.
Thanks, Don.
Hi, this is Jean. Let me turn on my camera here. So in Basra, we're primarily using Google Classroom. All the students are using that, but particularly the distance learners are using Google Classroom. They're also having Zoom meetings with their peers at least once a week. And we have in grades 1 through 5, I believe. We have one educator that's been permanently assigned to just the distance learners. It's a small school, so it's a manageable number for this one teacher. And all the students meet with her once a day. And she's able to make sure that they're all staying on task and moving along with their peers. It does put us in a difficult situation because she was our interventionist, and so now we're down that position. But with the money we're receiving from the state, we're going to be able to hopefully get some back support for our reading program, which obviously is in great need right now with so many students coming back. One thing we did hear at our board meeting on Tuesday from the parents are the students who are not behind the students that are doing well and keeping up. Some of them are not feeling like their children are challenged enough with the distance learning, and they're just giving, and I won't say meaningless, but they run out of work. They're given things like crossword puzzles and such to work on to fill the gaps in time. And so I think that needs to be a focus going forward, not only supporting our students who may have fallen behind, but also engaging and moving forward the students that were moving forward last year during the shutdown. We don't want to lose them and have them regress back to the level of some students that may not have kept up.
Thanks, Jean. That's great that you're able to have an educator make that personal connection with your students. Other comments, things you may have heard, knowing that you're not in the classroom or in the Google Classroom, but things you may have heard about. All right, Bob, I think the idea of getting for one of these calls a superintendent to share some success stories would be great.
Sure. We'll work on that.
Can I ask a question? A question of you, Patrice, and then I have a question to ask the callers today. But you mentioned that's retired educators about going back into the classroom, and you may or may not know the answer to this. And not that I'm really speaking for myself, but using myself as an example. I retired in 06. I kept my certification, which is administrative and teaching, updated for, I want to say maybe 4 years. So I've been out 14 years now. So I no longer have certification. If I decided I want to, I go brain dead one day and decide I want to go back into the school system as a teacher, can that be done?
I believe, Dawn, that, and it's clear that you anticipate having a lot of free time on your hands at some point. I believe, as someone whose certificate expired about 25 years ago, I think it's a complicated process with a lot of hoops to go through to become recertified when there's been a significant gap in time since certification lapsed. I think the target for the discussions around some more flexibility for retired educators is for those who are much more recently retired.
Yeah, okay. And those are the people you're probably not going to get, you know, if you go after those 10 or more. Okay. I do have a question, because you did broach the subject about a state board issue that did come up yesterday again, and and we had sent it back to, well, basically back to the commissioner to come up with some protocol, some regulations around potentially, before we vote on this, snow days, that we go to virtual learning. And so essentially you'll start the school year knowing what day is the last day of school, so you can better plan your graduations, etc. What's board chairs who are on the call, your reaction to the elimination of snow days? Both positive and negative, I guess, because we know how much kids depend on that day off, and to know that, okay, it's not coming anymore. You're in school 5 days a week unless it's a holiday. Board chairs, what's your reaction to that?
So Don, this is Megan in Woodstock again. It wasn't a snow day, but last night I had 74% of my town without power because of a microburst that came through. This morning, fortunately, there was only 12% without power. And we are running in a hybrid, I guess, hybrid learning model right now. We did have school. The buses could make through the majority of town. The schools had power. And I'll be getting an update tonight from our administrative team in our meeting about how it went for those remote learners who did not have access to the internet this morning. But in concern to actual snow days as well, I guess this was a trial run for us, because usually if there's a snow day, that means there's no power. There's no internet. We had talked about possibly having some sort of a half day, so the students will still be receiving some instruction, but I guess as a mix, that the staff would still have some time off. The students would still be able to have some time off as well, if it's possible. But no decisions have been made yet on that.
Let me ask you this though, and this applies to everybody out there. I mean, we are in hurricane season, so I understand the loss of power, and which will throw virtual out the window. But do you normally have loss of power with snow?
I would say more often than not, we do, because there are a lot of trees
Okay.
that get taken down with our
Yeah.
wires.
Okay.
And our middle school has a generator, but our elementary school does not.
Okay. Okay. Others out there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Sheila, and it's also a question of, Patrice mentioned earlier, you know, if the teachers can't get in that are teaching from their classrooms, if Mrs. Smith, the third grade teacher, can't get in, that's one teacher. If, you know, if many teachers can't, what's the percentage of teachers that can't teach that you would then close school? Or then have it be a old-fashioned snow day, I guess is another way to say it. And then, you know, what percentage of, how would you know if your town was if your town was without internet for X population, how would you know what that percentage would be that you would then say, okay, then we're not going to have school? So there's considerations on considerations, I guess.
Yeah, well, that was another factor I hadn't really heard about, because I don't believe it's happening really in Bloomfield, that teachers are going in to do the online learning. I'm assuming most of them are doing that. Those that are doing it from their home. I mean, by example, yesterday, Wednesday, all the schools in Bloomfield are closed for deep cleaning. That means nobody is in the building, but yet we did have school because, and my next call will be to the superintendent just to confirm that, which in my mind means that everybody is at home doing online teaching. So I hadn't considered the fact that teachers are going in, and that would certainly be an issue.
I want to raise
Certainly,
one.
if they know there's going to be a snow day, you'd know the day before, or you could plan to take your teaching materials home if you knew the day before there would be snow. So
Yeah, that's true.
As someone that lives in a rural area with a long driveway, I just want to know who's going to shovel the snow if it's not really a snow day and it's a teaching learning day.
Patrice, if I could jump in too, one of the other hats I wear at CABE is to serve on the CAPS Technology Subcommittee. And for the last 2 years at least, they've been working to try to get the state to accept online learning to substitute for snow days, with the idea that if we had organized packets, you know, snow day packets, whether they were paper and or electronic, and they've been trying to get for a couple of years, even just to let it be piloted. So this is something that had been under discussion for at least a couple of years already.
Yeah.
The last commissioner really didn't feel it was appropriate because of the way we measure classroom participation, I guess really still seat time. But we went from you can't do it to that's all we can do for a while. So I think there may be a place for a controlled process for allowing districts to make up those days or count those days now that we are counting a lot of days from digital learning. So I think flexibility, but there are districts that were piloting this last winter, you know, on the plus days, because you had to have 180. So that 182nd or 183rd day that you might have in your contract, they were saying, let's see if this will work. So there have been districts, probably some of yours, that were already looking at this anyway. So it'd be nice if there was a way of getting sort of approval to do it.
This is Michelle in Newtown. I just want to echo what Nick was just saying. I know our superintendent has been advocating for having the snow days for the past several years and piloting a program. I do think it does depend a lot on the circumstances of what the snow day is, whether it's, we have several schools that don't have air conditioning, and often that's a concern at the end of the year. they usually end up being early release days, not completely out of school days, but that knowing that you could take the day off might help rather than making it an early release day. But yeah, I do think there are definitely circumstances where it could be equitable in terms of, as long as there aren't specific families without power, I think that complicates things, or teachers without power if they're teaching from home. But otherwise, I think it would be incredibly helpful to have the snow days as an option.
Hello, this is Daryl Thames from Manchester Board of Education, and we are strongly moving in the direction of canceling snow days as we know them, as we've known them in the past. The superintendent is definitely advocating for it. I support him in that effort, and I'm sure that the remaining board members will support him as well. Listening to some of your conversations has really made me think of, about some of the difficulties that we could possibly face. But I think what we'll end up doing is going for it and trying to fix the problems that arise. Excuse me, because we don't expect that there'd be a totally smooth transition, just like when we transitioned from when we transitioned back in March to this hot remote learning and distance learning. We don't expect it to be absolutely foolproof, but we learned a lot from that, right? We learned a lot of kids didn't have Wi-Fi. We learned a lot of kids didn't have computers. We've been able to get computers. We've been fortunate with grants from the Harvard Foundation, from the federal government and from the state government. So our kids have the tools that we need. We have about 6,300 kids in Manchester. We've managed to connect Wi-Fi hotspots of those folks, for those families that do not have Wi-Fi. And so we're going to go for it, and we're going to figure it out. And we believe that it will, particularly given the fact that the education is somewhat watered down, or let's say diluted. Watered down makes it seem so weak. It's diluted when it's in the hybrid fashion anyway. So to dilute it further with 10 snow days, I think would be just tragic for the quality of education that we can provide for our children. So I think it's worth the effort, and we're going to give it a try.
Anybody else want to comment?
Hi, this is Lydia from Simsbury. I agree with what everyone has said before me. I think communication to parents early on is extremely important. We have not had that discussion yet at our board, and we will be starting our budget process in November, late November. But I think having this topic on the surface with parents, with families, with community is extremely crucial to, if we decide to go in one direction or another direction or a consolidated direction, because we do not want to be at a point where we have a snowfall in November, December, January, and we have not yet set any kind of protocol for what we're going to be doing.
I'm sure come at because our last meeting was yesterday at the state board, and dollar to donuts, we will have procedure or policy that will be presented to us at the November meeting in time for the upcoming winter. And I think it's going to happen. I don't see any opposition from the board.
It's hard to make an argument against it at this point, even though as a sort of a newcomer still to New England after 25 years, it's kind of sad to see that little culture, that little happiness that we give the kids once in a while when they see across the ticker on the bottom of the screen that their school is canceled for the day and they can do what they want. I don't think that's a great argument, but a little piece of culture is leaving.
Very true. Very true. So look forward to how we can go sledding. We can do all that stuff.
And the
As,
teachers look forward to it.
as of now, as long as they got their phones, that's where they're glued to for 6 hours.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'd rather have them in school.
Let me ask another question, and you know, I told you before, Dr. Marc Brackett and Scott Levy are going to join us any minute now. But let me ask you a question. Jackie Rabe in today's Connecticut Mirror talked about in the state's 10 most challenged districts, 58% are learning online compared to 25% in other districts. Now, obviously, those most challenged districts are very often a city, et cetera. But I'm wondering, first of all, there's an equity issue here that at some point has to be addressed. And the other question I have for you is, how are you making sure all your kids are taking advantage, signing in, et cetera, being part of getting education if they're not in the schools? Anybody want to address this? What percentage of your students are not in school or still learning, just learning from home? Chris?
We have, it varies from school to school, of course, but it generally falls between like 20 and 30%.
And do you have an idea of how many may not be actually calling in?
It's funny you asked that, because we had that conversation at our board meeting last night, and the schools have that data and the principals have that data, but we have not aggregated the data district wide. So we really couldn't, the superintendent couldn't make any comment on it district wide, but each of the schools has that information. And also, as they've talked about on this group, there's a lot of strategies being employed to try to make sure that those that are not engaged, you know, why they're not engaged and what we can do to help them become more engaged. I can tell you as a grandparent, I've been the, I guess you call it the helper for the last 4 weeks with several of my grandchildren, and it is particularly challenging. You know, doing all this technology and work. I'm lucky my wife is really better at it than I, and so I just kind of go in and watch the kids a little when she can't. But, you know, getting through all these Seesaw and all these other programs is kind of challenging for, you know, grandparents. I don't know, maybe parents are more in tune to it.
Absolutely. Well, I see Scott is now joined us. You there, Scott?
Scott and Mark are on.
Hi, Mark.
Yep, and Mark should be on in a minute. I don't know if he's on yet, but he will be on in a minute.
I'm here. Hi.
Mark is there.
Terrific. So we asked Mark and Scott, who most of you have known, have seen them at our convention a couple of years ago, and certainly we had a big superintendent and board member workshop a little while ago, maybe the end of April, I'm guessing. But now they are offering a course through the Center for Emotional Intelligence and through Yale that is free for all board members in Connecticut. I know they have some great numbers about the number of people who are taking the course, and I just turned this over to them to encourage our board chairs to either think of taking the course themselves or encouraging people in their districts to do so. So Mark and Scott.
Scott, I'll start. I'll just say 2 seconds and please just take over.
Perfect.
So firstly, hi everyone, nice to see you. I don't know if you can see me or not, but that's fine. It's not a good day for me. Just kidding. Very briefly, we are beyond grateful to Dalio Education for generous support to build this course on, it's called Social and Emotional Learning. Strategies to support teachers during stressful and uncertain times. And it's a 10-hour course that is for free, and every teacher in the state of Connecticut and other educator who completes the course will get a certificate from Yale upon completion, which is really cool. We've had 20,000 people register across the state so far, so we're just blown away by that, and feel great about it. Already a couple thousand have entered the course and are taking it. About 100 or so have already completed it. They're just eager to go through it. And essentially, just to say briefly, it's a course that focuses on, there are 8 kind of domains, and it starts with why are we doing this course right now during COVID and times of systemic racism and social unrest and everything else. Why do we need this right now? Why is this more important than ever before? Then a lot of training in identifying your feelings as a teacher, to understanding how to manage those feelings, to understanding racial bias, implicit bias, cultural kind of competence, to understanding students' feelings and helping students to manage their feelings. And so we feel great about it, and we're unbelievably, like, we couldn't believe we got it done in the amount of time we had to get it done for the fall. And we're, encouraging literally every superintendent across the state to submit their rosters for every educator and staff member in their district. And we anonymously send people links, and people can go through the course. And Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So I think Mark summarized it well. I'll just add that. And as some of you know, maybe that have seen us before, in addition to serving as the executive director at the center, I also sit on a public school board in New York State and the Regional School Board Association in the Lower Hudson Valley. And so I've lived, as all of you have, through this process of trying to figure out what to do this fall, and have sat there, making decisions that certainly none of us ever thought we would need to make, with related to the public health and welfare of our students and our faculty. And certainly one thing that was clear to me all the way through the summer was so much of the success of whatever path a district chooses, whether it's online, whether it's hybrid, or whether it's all in person, so much of it depends on whether or not the teachers and the staff are ready and comfortable to serve in those roles, whether it's online, hybrid, or in person, and whether they can manage through what is incredible uncertainty that we face every single day. And that's really the genesis of what this course is trying to get at, getting at the heart of that, trying to give teachers and staff, and as we said at the beginning, certainly open to administrators and boards to take the course as well. But it was designed with the lens of really teachers, staff, trying to give them just some help in terms of understanding the science behind stress and anxiety, and understand good strategies that they can employ as they navigate through what will be a continued period of a tremendous amount of uncertainty and anxiety. So that's where this course comes from, and it's self-paced, and so it's very flexible for anybody to complete. And we're really thankful to Dalio Philanthropies for giving us the resources to be able to do this and offer it up for no charge with a Yale certificate.
Yep. Let me just add one thing. One, I think Bob and Patrice, you guys have the link that you can share with everybody, right?
Yes, we've been putting it in our Wednesday email e-blast to everybody.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And I think just relating to what Scott said and what we said earlier is that we've done the research. We already have, by the way, there's a research project associated with this, and already over 1,500 teachers have participated. And we're learning, what their experiences are. And as you can imagine, these are stressful and uncertain times for many, and they're not necessarily equipped to deal with their anxiety and fear. And so we want to just make sure that teachers are equipped, and leaders are equipped, and counselors are equipped. And, the way I like to think about it, a stressed out board president is a stressed out board, and a stressed out superintendent is a stressed out district office, and a stressed out principal is a stressed out school, and a stressed out teacher is a stressed out classroom. So the more we can do to help people manage their stress, the healthier and, and a more engaged and productive everybody can be. So that's our pitch. We hope you will spread the word, and maybe we can take a few questions if you have any.
Sure, that'd be great. As somebody who went through the seedlings work that Mark and Scott did 2 summers ago, I found it was hugely helpful in understanding so some of those social emotional triggers, what to do in a case where things just are not going right. And, you know, they're great life lessons. You don't necessarily have to be a board member or a teacher, but certainly all of us go through stressful times, are going through stressful times. And anxiety and angst seems to be feel a little never ending at this point. So I just suggest anybody who wants to take the course, I would strongly recommend it.
Thanks, Bob. I want to say also related to what you just said is that like the mindset around, like I always tell people, you know, I'm a professor of emotional intelligence and I'm anxious. Like there's legitimate reasons to be anxious, right? These are uncertain times. So the goal is not to like take the air of your brain where anxiety lives and like try to get rid of it, because that's not going to happen. And so it's really about not getting rid of it, but learning how to manage it effectively so that you can be present, so that you can be engaging as a teacher, so that you can, you know, be a good parent, etc. And I think that's not taught. So we want to make it explicit.
Anybody have any questions? Don, are you indicating a question? Just moving your arm, okay. Well, Scott and Mark, thank you so much. I know you are in the middle of another meeting, and thanks for coming and thanks for offering this course. What an opportunity. 20,000 people.
Yep.
That is just terrific. So
our
with
pleasure
that, excuse me, was somebody going to say something?
No, I was just saying our pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So with that, thank you all. This wraps up our board chair check-in and updates for this week. Actually for the next 2 weeks, because we're doing them every 2 weeks. And thank you for spending the time with us. Hope you learned something. And if you have questions or anything else, please don't hesitate to contact us. So be well, and thank you very much.